Day one of Steelers training camp is in the books. Diontae Johnson is holding in while we saw the rookie wide receivers, George Pickens and Calvin Austin, show up big time. We'll talk about that, a few other observations I had on the quarterbacks and the safety position right here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button if you enjoyed. Hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content when we have breaking news updates. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. And let's get right into it, because the big news that really happened with the first day of training camp Wednesday. Players reported Tuesday. They practiced first Wednesday. Diontae Johnson came out, was dressed for practice, started did the warm-ups and everything, but then went off and did his own thing, individuals. And when the team was doing team drills, he wasn't a part of it. Sounds a lot like TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick, don't it? You know what they have that he doesn't? Multiple first-team All-Pros. I'm not saying that Diontae Johnson isn't wrong for trying to get the money that he thinks he deserves, but I don't think he has nearly the standing that those two guys have or had when making the negotiations. But who knows? Maybe he's making a point. But I don't think it's that big of a deal right now about his hold-in. Either he'll come back to the Steelers, to the table with the Steelers. They'll work something out. Something will happen, and it'll be fine. What I thought was truly impressive about Wednesday was how the rookie wide receivers really showed up. Now, there was, there were different things we want to talk about, but George Pickens looked really good, made some really impressive catches in one-on-ones, and then in team drills, 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s, he made some really nice plays. There were some plays where you saw him bending backwards while getting way up in the air, made a really nice, impressive deep catch that I say was around like 30, 35 yards for Mitch Trubisky over Cameron Sutton, who was in decent position. There were some good plays from his part. And I thought that it was a really good sign from him. Calvin Austin caught a wide receiver screen from Mason Rudolph, took it to the house. He just took one step and hit the seam, and he was gone. And this was with a defense that was in position a lot throughout the practice as a person who was watching every step of the way on the sideline. I was very impressed by how these guys handled themselves. Now, as Mike Tomlin will tell you, he ain't crowning nobody today, because one practice does not a superstar make. But this is what we're here to do with the Daily Steelers podcast. We get you through everything. We tell you what's up, but we also try to sprinkle in, like, hey, take everything with a grain of salt. Just take it one step at a time. Don't overreact to any one thing. But I will say this: I did like what I saw and what I heard from both of the rookie wide receivers in Pickens and Austin but during practice, when they were practicing, and then after practice when we caught up with them and got to talk to them. I want to give you guys a glimpse of both of them. We're going to start with George Pickens, because he talked about the play that he made, the feeling that he's getting with Mitch Trubisky. But he also talked about something else I thought was cool. Was that something, and I wrote about this on SteelersNow.com. There's something a little different that the Steelers wide receivers are doing. When they're running their individual drills. Now, to understand what individual drills are, basically at the start of the practice period, if you've never been to training camp before, each position groups go off on their own spaces and do their own drills to get ready for the team drills. And so tight ends are with tight ends, running backs were with their people, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, or someone different place. Everyone goes to their spots. Well, wide receivers, they're going through their drills that the new wide receiver coach, Rizman Jackson, is having them go through. But as they're doing them, they're doing 2 reps. 1 rep, they're catching rugby balls, which are much bigger than regular footballs. And then the next rep, they're catching with regular footballs. And that was really interesting. And I was like, wow, I've never seen them do that. So I just assumed it was Rizman Jackson. Come to find out, Alan Saunders, my colleague over at SteelersNow.com, went to Anthony Miller and asked him about it because we asked Calvin Austin and asked George Pickens, and they were like, "No, we've never seen it before, but it's pretty cool." It was Anthony Miller's idea. He said he got it from his receiving coach that he was working with during the summer, and he said, Calvin Austin was like, hey, like this made catching a regular football seem easy, and it had some real impact. But take a listen to how George Pickens talked about his first day. He made some really big catches. You could say he was the star of the day, even with the plays that he made. But he's kind of treating it like any other day.
So I just go with the flow.
Can you kind of walk us through that catch you had down on the sideline on the deep ball?
Oh, yeah. I kind of went deep, and Cam was playing off, and really Mitch just literally gave me a chance. He kind of threw it up and then made a play.
How motivated were you to come down, survive the ground with that catch after the other one kind of popped out?
Yeah, I told myself I'm not dropping it. I don't care if I fell into some rocks, you know what I mean? But the first one was just kind of irritated me because that would have been a crazy catch.
You guys look like you were working from rugby balls to footballs. Is that something that you're used to doing, or is that something new that Frisbee's going to do?
Nah, now that is that's something new I've been like that they've been doing that I just kind of acclimated to. But that's also that helps a lot. It kind of makes the like when you transition from the rugby ball back to the league ball, it makes it smaller. It feels way smaller. It feels like a tennis ball.
That's really interesting to me. And I'm a person who I've always been fascinated by wide receivers. I think they're some of the best athletes in all of sports with the things that they're able to do. But the idea of catching, because Diontae Johnson spent a lot of time catching actual tennis balls last year. He was working on his hand-eye coordination, just catching them all over the place. And I also want to say, when Diontae Johnson went off and did work, he was absolutely working. He was catching it with people standing in his way, taller people kind of putting their hands up. Diontae Johnson was working the entire practice. He's not just sitting around just watching, just kind of chilling. He's trying to get better. But I think this is his version to say, hey, I deserve to get paid too. But back to what George Pickens was talking about, the rugby thing did make a difference. And there was a catch where you kind of saw him go up above his head and kind of bend backwards in a really impressive way that it's like, whoa, that's acrobatic almost. And those are the type of things that you see George Pickens, to make you say like, man, that kid could be a number one wide receiver in the NFL. But again, when you asked him about this, he made it seem not a big deal. We were all trying to say like, hey, what's it like being at Steelers training camp? Because as you could kind of hear in the background of that video as we were talking to him, there's all these fans that are screaming, yeah, Kenny, George, yeah, just give me an autograph. And everyone's doing their thing. And at one point, George Pickens is like, someone asked like, hey, so is this like a big deal? Like, how do you feel about the pressure of this? And he's like, well, I was just in a national championship game. So, and I was like, okay, big flex, George. That was fine. But all in all, I thought George Pickens acquitted himself very well. Now, again, he has to keep acquitting himself very well. But the good thing is he mentioned how he knows that. And he mentioned how both him and Calvin Austin know that. Because when I asked Mike Tomlin, he said, I'm not going to crown him after one day. That's ridiculous. But that's Mike Tomlin's way of I'm not hyping nobody up. I'm just here to to talk about the day, and he doesn't want to get anyone's head too big. But if you're a coach and you see guys making that play, you're like, okay, we'll keep testing you, but that's a good start to how this is rolling. And I asked after I asked Tomlin that, I took that quote to both Pickens and Austin, and both were kind of like, yeah, we know we're here to work. We're not happy. We're not just satisfied with today. We're not just like, oh yeah, today was great. That's all we need. They were both kind of like, yeah, that's the whole point. And they're both roommates. And one thing that I thought was very interesting was how they talked about each other as brothers, and how they're like, they went through mini camp together. Now they're rooming together. And they're feeling a bond develop. They don't talk. They're like, hey, neither of us are really big talkers. So it kind of like allows us to both be quiet in our own space. And then when we're quiet in our own space, then we want to talk to each other because we vibe that way. So I thought that was interesting. I want to get you guys to listen to some things that Calvin Austin said, because we saw some different things about how the slot was being used with the Steelers, and how in general the overall themes of the offense were being used in this training camp practice. But again, one day we get that, but I think it's still important to talk about. We'll talk about that in just a second here. But first, we got to talk to you about our great sponsors at Built Bar. They have a new flavor coming out. They always got new flavors coming out. It's cookie dough chunk puff. Now we had the coconut brownie chunk puff. Now it's time for the cookie dough. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? This new flavor, it's ready, delicious, indulgent cookie dough and covered in chocolate. That's right. Built Bar has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite. It's cookie dough chunk puffs, and they have a light, chewy texture with real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, just like all Built Bars and Built Puffs are. They have all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it, plus it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It will be a perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place and just hoard them for yourself. Like all Built Bars, the new cookie dough chunk puff is covered in 100% real chocolate. That means they're healthy and tasty. Chocolate covered cookie dough with a light, fluffy texture. So good. And what's great about Built is that all of their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff, whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just need grab a quick bite to eat. Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, the fat, and the sugar, and be sure to grab yourself a Built Bar. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. So I talked about George Pickens' success and the things that I thought were good from him. I want to get you a chance to listen to Calvin Austin for a bit, because he made some plays, but he also made some plays from the slot, which is where naturally a smaller receiver often goes in the NFL. But I will say the slot had multiple effective guys in these practices. Chase Claypool was in the slot and made some really nice catches. Calvin Austin, of course, was in the slot. Gunnar Olszewski was in the slot. Those are all three guys that I think are good enough to make the team. I mean, Chase is going to be on the team. He's made multiple touchdowns for this team. He's going to be there. Calvin Austin is going to make the team. They just drafted him in the 4th round. Gunnar Olszewski could be tough because he's going to need to earn his way on special teams as well, even though he has been a Pro Bowl special teamer. But still, I liked what I saw out of guys in the slot, and the Steelers weren't afraid to kind of rotate more and more guys in there to work with them, whether it was first team, second team, or third team. But asking Calvin Austin about this, because it looked like he was getting involved in the slot, he kind of talked about, hey, there's a lot of versatility in this receiver room. Not everyone is ready to kind of go wherever they're being put, and I think that's the big weapon here that they need to get used to, is that if this young receiving group can develop this sort of thing where we're going out, we're lining up, but we can take on different positions. And this is not an easy thing, by the way. These, especially the rookie wide receivers, they're going to have to adapt to the playbook. Chase Claypool mentioned how, like, in his first year, he could only run routes from a certain spot on the field for every formation, but then his second year he was able to run from different formations, and that was something that helped him. I want you to listen to Calvin Austin here for a sec. We asked him about the slot play and a few other things here after the practice when he had a really nice 61-yard touchdown on a wide receiver screen.
Oh, most definitely. I just think it shows everybody's versatility in the receiver room. I wouldn't even say we have locked positions. Everybody can be, coaches call us in there and kind of lets us figure out which position we go in at, because all of us know each position and are able to do many different things, even though we have all the different body types.
What's in this when you said, I ain't counting nobody in one day? How do you guys take that as just like a day-to-day approach trying to prove yourself?
Oh, me and George, we talk. I mean, we're roommates up here, and we already had that mindset that, we come in to just work every day. Like, we just coming to work. Like, it's not even nothing more to it, but we just coming to work. George is a dog. I'm a dog. That's what I'm saying. Like, what I showed right there, that was just a part of practice almost. So we just come in the show, try to make big plays, and just help the team out every day and just compete. That's all we about, is competing.
That deep ball down the sideline.
George is a dog. I'm a dog. Hey, I'd like to be a dog because these guys were making hex of plays. But pay attention to what Calvin Austin was saying there, because he talked about that versatility in the first part, and he addressed that was me asking the question about Mike Tomlin and saying, hey, I'm not going to crown you guys after that. And again, they understand they got to work. I think what's really interesting about both these guys is they possess raw talent that if if developed in the right way, can make them very dangerous in the NFL. Pickens can get off the line really well. He skies up really well. He has really good hands, and he seems to have extreme flexibility to make these different plays at different angles. He also seems to understand how to do them in different spots. He's tapping his toes in different situations. And in the one pass that Mitch Trubisky threw, it wasn't the best pass, and it got there, and it was a deep ball that beat Cam Sutton, but George Pickens had to kind of slow up a little bit. He had to kind of turn back, get his back shoulder. It was a good throw because it got there, but it wasn't the perfect throw in my mind. But still, he adjusted and made it look really good. Same thing for Calvin Austin. He was talking about his play. He said Gunnar Olszewski jumped in, blocked the man out the way. I saw that. I hit the seam and I was gone. These are guys that they're going to be interesting talents for Mike Tomlin, Matt Canada, and the Steelers offense to deploy, because when they start using these guys, if they're making big splash plays, that's going to make things so much easier for this offense. The Steelers offense the last 2 years, especially really the last 3 years, they haven't been a big play offense. They've been, dink and dunk, work you down the field, and when you work you down the field, you hope you convert in the red zone. This is going to be a team that doesn't need to have to rely on such as many long drives, I think, this year to make things work. And it's great to have long drives. It's important to have long drives to grind clock. And there will be times when the running game does that. But there's going to be times, I think, when the passing game has more of an opportunity to break loose there. I also thought it was interesting that this happened. And this might just be a one-day thing. This might change tomorrow, and I will tell you if it did. But the Steelers, when they started practice, typically, if you're familiar with training camp, they do what's called 7 shots. And they do this in training camp and in regular practice. And 7 shots is a drill where the offense and the defense, they go to the 2-yard line, they work the goal line, they work red zone. 7 shots, offense just tries to get those 2 yards into the end zone, whether it's run, pass. Most of the time it's just passing. But it's just a way to compete in the red zone, something the Steelers have done to improve their red zone percentage. They didn't do 7 shots this year. Or on their first practice on Wednesday. And I was a little shocked because at one point they finished up their individuals. I started running down to the end zone. I'm like, oh, it's 7 shots time. Get down there. And then they're not doing 7 shots. They're doing 11 on 11 in the middle part of the field and practicing third downs. And I was like, wait a second, that's not right. Where's the 7 shots? And that just didn't happen. But I think it's a little interesting to see how, maybe it's because, hey, you know what? This team, in the past, when they had Ben Roethlisberger and they had a few years, where they struggled in the red zone, they knew, hey, we got to work this to make sure this works. Now, I think right now, this Steelers offense, they're finding their identity. They don't know necessarily their strengths yet or their weaknesses. And this is going to be a thing like, hey, let's practice situational football. And they did. They came out, and instead of 7 shots, they did a whole bunch of third down opportunities. Now, I wasn't able to keep track of all the exact data because I had someone interrupt me in the middle of it, and was rather interesting incident there. But Brooke Pryor of ESPN did, who you've also heard in some of these interviews that we've been talking, and she said for the first set of third down plays, Trubisky went 1 of 4, Rudolph 4 of 4, and Pickett 2 of 4. Now, of course, everyone's going to start to say, oh man, I guess that means Mason Rudolph's going to be the number 1 quarterback. Everyone calm down. Don't even try to go there. Don't even think about it. Because Mike Tomlin told y'all, about even before camp started, he said, we are not going to judge this on a pass by pass basis. This is a long-term thing. I want to remind people, if you're familiar with the grind of training camp and how long this stuff gets and how you have to kind of piece things together practice by practice and then remember things at the end of camp to put together the puzzle of what the Steelers are actually going to do. If you remember the battle in 2019 between Mason Rudolph, Josh Dobbs, and Devlin Hodges, there were several practices where Josh Dobbs made more plays than Mason Rudolph. And it was like, whoa, wait a second. That guy's doing it. Maybe there's something there. But you look back at why he was making those plays, and it was because he was doing against third-team defenses or because he was using his feet in a way that the Steelers probably won't try to have him use his feet. And if you ask the layman fan, there were a lot of people that felt, hey, Josh Dobbs is beating out Mason Rudolph. And most of the reporters were like, no, I'm telling you right now, Mike's going to prefer the way Mason is doing things. So this is not to say that, that it's not good for Mason Rudolph that he had a 4-for-4 day in throwing and getting the ball on those third down situations. But it's another thing to remind you, like, hey, it's just the first day. There's literally no pads on. We don't know what's going on there. Same thing for Kenny Pickett. A really funny moment, and one of the funniest moments of practice was when the first two passes, Mitch Trubisky throws one pass to Najee. It was a little bit of a miscommunication, and Najee never looked for the ball, so it's incomplete. The second pass, it's like a low pass to Chase Claypool. It hits the ground, and someone immediately says, "Put Pickett in there," and I'm like, okay. Y'all, like, I looked right back to the stands and I'm like, whoever said that, y'all look crazy. Two passes. My man had two passes. I knew it was eventually going to come around. Like, I thought it would take like a preseason game. We got to the first practice and literally his first two passes in 11-on-11, and you had people in the stands yelling that kind of stuff. Y'all need to chill. It is not that deep. But this is going to be a long process. And we even kind of joked around with Mike Tomlin afterwards. Brooke Pryor asked him, so have you picked a QB1 yet? And he's like, no, ask me tomorrow. And he ain't going to do. We're not going to know until for sure until the end of this full camp. Probably not even at the end of camp, probably right before the season starts. So all that being said, I thought with the new quarterbacks, with the new wide receivers, there was a lot of playmaking happening out there and big playmaking. Now, there were also mistakes. I thought Kenny Pickett made a really nice pass over the middle to Anthony Miller, who made a really nice catch. That was pretty solid. I think Kenny Pickett had a really good wheel route pass to Najee Harris that was really solid. I think it was not Kenny Pickett. It might have been Mitch Trubisky. Might be mixing up my guys. It's been a long day. But Kenny Pickett also ended the practice by throwing an interception that was kind of like in the middle of a tight zone package there. And the defense had a really big celebrations that was actually kind of interesting there. But all in all, these guys, I thought, acquitted themselves well for a first day. There was no one that kind of stood out as like, man, that guy's terrible. And unprepared or anything like that. But again, I thought that the biggest thing that I took away from especially the offense was that these two young rookie wide receivers came out, showed that they were hungry, proved that they belong, and afterwards they were still talking like, hey, yeah, we are hungry and we know that this does not satiate us. We want to get more and we want to show more. So good things for them. I will keep an eye on both George Pickens and Calvin Austin as things move forward. I want to talk to you guys, though, about the safety situation because, as I said before, Minkah Fitzpatrick on the non-football related illness list because he hurt his wrist during a bike accident on a vacation. We'll talk about that, what we saw of Minkah Fitzpatrick, but also who we saw replacing Minkah Fitzpatrick and what I saw from that. We'll do that in just a second here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're continuing our discussion here about the first day of training camp for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just a reminder, too, no pads were on. They had, they were running around. There were helmets, but like, it was shorts and jerseys and standard stuff. So like every year, and we always would pick like who would be our early training camp heroes. For about a few years, it was like Justin Hunter. He would go up and he would make these amazing catches and do these amazing things. And people were like, man, that guy's going to be a superstar. Then the pads went on and he was just another guy. But so that could absolutely be what happens with George Pickens or Calvin Austin. Not saying it will, just pointing out it is impossible to definitively say, oh yeah, this guy's going to be great or that guy's going to be great after one practice. But I did think there were some interesting things with the safety position. One, Minkah Fitzpatrick, of course, not practicing, but you saw him working, still catching the football. Now he has a bad wrist. Now his wrist isn't like in a cast or anything. It might have some stuff under his clothes, but he was catching with his left hand, which tells you, I believe it's his right hand that's injured. But he was making these one-handed catches, just practicing that because he wants to be able to catch the football whenever it gets to him. Thought that was pretty cool. But I also thought it was cool who replaced him. It was Diontae Johnson, who they brought in free agency right after the draft. I did a whole video about it. You can look it up on YouTube and you'll be able to find it. But Diontae Johnson was able to go in there, was kind of moving around, and I thought the defense communicated well. There were several plays where the offense was kind of trying to string them out with the run or work different concepts, and the defense was communicating. They were all on it. They were in position. I thought he actually acquitted himself well, and this was what I said about way back when they signed KZ, because I thought, hey, the big thing here is the Steelers need a good rotation of safeties so that they can disguise what they're doing. The more guys that can either be in deep coverage or fake being in deep coverage helps disguise what you're doing. And that's something that Terrell Austin, as I've talked about myself, Josh Taylor's talked about on this show, that is something that I think Terrell Austin would specialize at if he had the right athletic safeties. And from what I saw from him, I liked. Now, here's the thing. All these things that they're practicing right now, these installs, that they could be some very basic vanilla things in these practices and not exactly what you're going to see come game time, especially in the early parts of training camp. But I think what will be interesting is when we start to see these guys work more and more, I'm going to want to see, and if you're a person who's at training camp, what I would try to see is, hey, note what kind of formations they're coming out in or what kind of sets they're showing. So, like, for example, if you know football, you might think, okay, Chris is about to bore me with some basic football things. But if you're a person who's, more of a casual fan and you're like, hey, I don't know plays like that. If you see both safeties kind of staying back deep, that usually signals cover 2, which means each safety is going to be responsible for a deep half of the field. So one's going to take one half, the other's going to take another. But sometimes there can be one safety back, and that's showing, hey, it's either going to be cover 1 or cover 3 or some variant where basically one guy's going to have the middle of the field. He could have the deep all to himself, or he has a middle third of the field while there's 2 people on the other thirds of the field of the sidelines covering those deep areas, and that's why it's cover 3, because there's 3 guys covering back. But then you start to get tricky because then there's like cover 6 that's kind of like a cover 3, but it shifts one safety, the middle safety, a little more to one side to kind of bunch up the area and mixes up the coverages underneath. And that's when the trickeration starts to happen for defensive coordinators. The Steelers used to get some really impressive turnovers back when they had Ryan Shazier, and they were able to have some more athletic safeties, like Sean Davis when he was young. They would use cover, they would show cover 4 and then go to cover 6, and cover 4 going to cover 6 means that one safety comes down, and that would fool a quarterback. But you need talented and smart safeties to pull that off. Guys who can say, hey, I'm going to line up in the right spot, stay here just long enough to fake out whatever position, because you can show, hey, here's 2 high safeties, but oh, wait a second, we're actually cover 1. And we said, hey, one safety, both instead of both safeties taking half the field, we're saying one safety down here, one safety here. And that's because, the quarterback says, oh, well, this area right here is going to be open. So that safety goes there, bang. It's usually a robber formation or robber play, robber concept that happens there. I'm going to be really intrigued to see how Diontae KZ, Terrell Edmunds, Minkah Fitzpatrick when he returns, and Trey Norwood, because don't forget him in that mix. I'm going to be interested to see how much of that is a big part of the Steelers defense. Because again, if the run defense is fixed, Larry Ogunjobi was there, didn't practice in full, was limited. But as Mike Tomlin said before training camp even started, they're going to ease him back in. Larry Ogunjobi even said they're going to ease him back in. So do not worry about that. But as I was talking about, this is going to be interesting because if they stuff the run, like we think that, hey, they've invested in Miles Jack, Devin Bush is supposed to be better. They've gotten Ogunjobi. They're excited about the run defense with the new additions on the defensive line. They're feeling better about that. The pass rush is still going to be the pass rush. I actually think that they're going to be even better this year. Crazy to think that with what TJ Watt's been doing, but I think that they're going to be just as dangerous. The coverage. If those 2 things are there and the coverage is there and you force some more 3rd and longs, that's when you can start putting in, hey, we're going to install this package where we're going to show them cover 3, but it's really cover 2. We're going to show them cover 2, and it's really going to be cover 1 or cover 3. That's when you're going to see these athletic safeties start to make moves. And we've seen Diontae KZ. I believe he's had a 5 or 6 interception season before. Terrell Edmunds has been getting 2 interceptions per in each of the last 2 seasons. We know Minkah Fitzpatrick can be an interception machine if he wanted to be. So I think a lot of this is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, but it's going to be about those veterans stepping up, understanding those roles, and developing that communication. Edmunds and Fitzpatrick are already there. In fact, I talked about that yesterday with Minkah Fitzpatrick and how he talked about with him and Terrell Austin. When I was talking about how him and Terrell Austin used to talk, guess who was in those discussions? Terrell Edmunds, in all of them, always talking. And it'd be the 3 of them chomping it up, looking at the defense, saying, all the things that they got to go through or things they got to fix. So if those guys are on the same page, if they can get Diontae KZ on the same page with them, and Trey Norwood, get smarter. And I think Trey Norwood was a very smart rookie. I think that it wouldn't take too much for him to adapt his game IQ to get up there and be usable in these situations. I think you could have a very interesting secondary. I've already talked about how the veterans across the board on the cornerback room, I think, provide some good competitive nature in the fact that all these guys are like 27 years old who have experience in the league and can play their assignments solidly. But if you have these kind of safeties who can disguise what they're doing, and when you start really installing different defensive looks to counter things that certain offenses like to do, that is going to be a big factor this year for the Steelers defense. So keep an eye out for that. We will let you know if we start to see more of that in camp. But hey, it just started. There's going to be a lot of things to talk about. We're going to see more of Najee Harris. I can't wait for the pads to go on. They should be going on in a few days now. So we can actually see some people popping. We can get some backs on backers. Haven't seen that in a long time, I guess in a year. But it's awesome. I also want to say it was pretty cool seeing fans back at St. Vincent College and all the people yelling for everyone's autograph. Even though some of y'all was really loud and some of y'all brought vuvuzelas and things that I was like, man, could y'all stop? It's just a little annoying, but I get it. You're Steelers fans, you're Steeler Nation. You want to be loud, you want to be heard, and you were having fun because those are your boys and you want to celebrate seeing your boys up close and personal. So I totally get it. But hey, thanks for checking out the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with more getting, kind of just explaining what I saw on day 2 of Steelers training camp. Also talking about what's going to be coming up with the weekend. We'll also be keeping you up to date with everything that's going on in Steelers training camp. So stay tuned right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast as we go. Again, we're Monday through Friday, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, YouTube, all the places that podcasts are hosted. If I have some time, I'm going to try on the weekend because, weekend practices, I don't do weekend shows. I'll try to do some, brief weekend breakdowns of what I saw in each training camp practice. So you're at least getting your fill during those days if you're not able to go there. Also, if you see me at training camp, as a lot of people did, and a lot of people were saying, hey, I love this show, do not be afraid to approach me. If I say, hey, I got to go, it's just because we got to be on the move sometimes because we got to do our job. And we got to report. But if you see me, I believe I bumped into a good brother named Charles, Lonnie, a bunch of people out there today. D, there was a lot of people out there I thought that I met. I was like, hey, so glad that you enjoy the show. Don't be afraid to talk to me. I'm happy to talk to y'all. I'm happy to say what's up. And I appreciate all of the people who listen to, watch this show and support it. So thanks so much to everyone who does that. Hope to see you at training camp. I hope to see my boy Tony Sereno at training camp because I heard he's coming up soon. When does Tony get here? You better hurry up. Anyways, y'all know me, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at SteelersNow.com. You can check out more of the Locked On Steelers podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, YouTube. Leave us a 5-star with a review with a positive comment. You do both at the same time on Apple Podcasts. You get a special shout out at the end of the show. Thanks again for listening and watching. We'll be back on your screens and in your ears Friday, giving you an update on how day 2 of training camp went on Thursday. See you then.